Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. There is a Van Gogh painting of Starry Night now hanging on the walls of the St. Louis Art Museum. Just hearing those words probably brings to mind an iconic image, or maybe even a song about the iconic image.
Starry, starry night.
But this is not the Starry Night you know from a million prints, T-shirts, and coffee mugs. That scene of a blue swirled sky over a little French village. That one is titled The Starry Night, and it's in the collection of MoMA in New York. This Starry Night is on loan from Paris. It's 1 year older, it shows actual stars, and it's titled Starry Night over the Rhone. Our intern Joshua Phelps asked art museum patrons what they thought of this version of Starry Night, and here's what they had to say.
It's being very much aware of where you are, and it's your interpretation. Everybody looks at night differently. To me, it's just a beautiful interpretation of nighttime.
Magnificent. Just magnificent. The colors, the shapes, his vision. The whole exhibit is magnificent.
Well, it just reminds me of when we were out of the country. It's kind of like you have the sails, you have the water, you have the reflection of the stars. I mean, I just love it.
I think it's more of a nightscape than a starry night.
Yeah, nightscape over water.
This one, I think the stars are more prominent. You know, that's like the focus. And this, I think the focus is not the stars. I think it's the whole scene and the water.
Tiring. I'd probably say I look at it and feel a little tired, a little sluggish. The colors very dark, and yeah, reminds me of nighttime cityscape in today's time with the lights on in the office and things like that. So yeah.
And those were St. Louis Art Museum patrons Holbert Wallner, Tamara Landrum, Mary Steinhugel, Barb Wolf, Paul Schultz, David Zimmerman, and Chase House. Starry Night over the Rhone is part of Millet and Modern Art from Van Gogh to Dalí. The show opens Sunday at the St. Louis Art Museum. And joining us today to talk about it is Simon Kelly. He's the curator of modern and contemporary art at the St. Louis Art Museum, and he co-curated this show. Simon Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's good to be here.
So just getting a painting like Starry Night over the Rhone on loan is quite a coup for the Art Museum. How unusual is it to have this painting here in St. Louis?
I think it's actually the first time it's ever been in St. Louis, so yeah, pretty unusual. I mean, it's a great painting. Van Gogh only ever did 2 Starry Nights. And actually, we've been using the title Starry Night in the exhibition because that's the title that the Musée d'Orsay uses. And
that's its true home.
It comes from the Musée d'Orsay. And that's a title that Van Gogh himself used. So, yeah, I mean, it's very rarely lent, that painting by the Musée d'Orsay. So, you know, it's really an exceptional opportunity for people to see.
And it's a stunning painting. We had some of our listeners describe it for us. But as a professional, tell us a little bit about this. How does it differ from the Starry Night at the MoMA?
I mean, this one is different because, for a start, it's painted outdoors. The one at MoMA is much more a sort of fictive image. So we know that, you know, Van Gogh actually painted, you know, he put his easel by the side of the river. There's a kind of mythology that he had candles around his hat, you know, as he was painting it to illuminate him. I don't think that's true. I
want that to be true.
Yeah, I know you want it to. I want it to be true too, but it was actually painted by gaslight. Okay, so. Yeah, but I think that's something that's unique about the work, that it was painted outdoors, and it's kind of it's a beautiful study of both natural light. You can see the Big Dipper in the sky. That's kind of interesting for anybody who's interested in the night sky. It's a pretty close, there's a close study of astronomy there. And then alongside that, there's a sort of fascination with the artificial light of the city. So you can see all the gas lights, which are just painted with these amazing kind of globs of paint, sort of thick globs of paint. So I mean, it's an amazing painting, and it's really a gift that it's here in St. Louis.
And so that one's such a showstopper, but it's not alone in this exhibit in stopping the show. What are some of the other highlights that you've been able to bring in for this show?
I mean, I think the Van Goghs. We have 14 Van Goghs in the show. So the Starry Night is the best known, but there are some other great, paintings. For example, there's a painting called The Sower, which is a really iconic work, which is coming from the Van Gogh Museum, who are our partners on the show. There are some great Dalís in the show, which I think will fascinate people. There's a Monet haystack. Those are tough to get. Those loans. There's really a sort of incredible range of works, and of course, you can't forget the Millets. The Millets are the origin of the show, and we have the Angelus, which is an iconic painting, again, like Starry Night, that never travels really, and that that's coming from the Musée d'Orsay and was really the best known modern painting at the end of the 19th century.
So I want to talk about Millet in just a moment, but the Angelus, tell us about this. What makes this such a big deal as far as paintings go?
I mean, I think at the end of the 19th century, it came up at auction. It achieved the highest price for any modern painting. So there's that kind of essential sort of commercial aspect to it. But it kind of became the symbol of France, at that time, and that continues even to this day in France.
And what does it depict that the French felt like this was their symbol?
It depicts two rural workers who are stopping to say a prayer. So they're stopping to say the Angelus prayer. Which, in the 19th century in France was a crucial way of actually sort of regulating time in the countryside before wristwatches. So they're saying a prayer. So it's about piety. It's about labor because they're working in the fields. And it's also about, the kind of fruitfulness of the land. So there's all of those elements that kind of combine to sort of produce an image that I guess was a flattering one for France. I guess the French thought so because it has become an iconic image.
They wanted to think of themselves as both pious and agrarian. It's
complicated, but I think so. Yes, I think that's really it. Because France is, even now it's a really agricultural country. There's a big, it's a large country and expansive fields, and so I think that as you say, it's a piety. It's a connection to rural life. It's a labor. It's all of those elements.
So as you mentioned, the reason that all of these paintings are here is Jean-François Millet. Mm-hmm. Should people be embarrassed if that name means nothing to them?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, that's part of the job of the show, because he was so well known in the 19th century and he was arguably the best known modern painter in the 19th century, but he's not so well known now. And that's part of the job of the show, to try to sort of, rediscover his importance, actually, and his original, also the kind of radicalism of his work. His work was seen as very radical, so we're trying to rediscover that.
And when we look at his paintings today, this does not fit any modern definition of radical. What was he doing that at the time was so explosive?
I mean, he was painting, he was painting the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized. So his subject matter was and he was giving them a real sort of dignity. And was that
not done at the time?
Not like Millet did it. I mean, I think the way he does it is different. And I think also at the moment that he's doing it at a time when, the male voters have just received the male workers have just received the vote in France, so suddenly they're empowered. So Millet is kind of tapping into that moment.
So this was almost political?
Yeah, it's definitely political. I mean, I think it's part political and it's also part artistic, because if you look at his work, it's always grounded in nature, but it becomes very abstract. And that abstraction, kind of the interest in pattern making, becomes a key part of his modernity.
And so people like Van Gogh and some of these great painters that followed him, did they consciously feel that they'd been influenced by him?
They did. I mean, Van Gogh wrote a lot about Millet in his correspondence. His letters are amazing, but he kind of saw Millet as a sort of father figure, as a sort of mentor for him. And a lot of the other artists too, Pissarro, right up to, an artist like Paula Model-Becker, the prominent German expressionist artist, and of course Dalí. I mean, Dalí wrote a whole book on Millet, and particularly on the Millet Angelus painting.
And as somebody who doesn't know that much about art, when I think of Dalí, I don't think of images of rural laborers having moments of piety. What was the connection between what Millet was doing and what Dalí did that struck such a chord with him?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think, Dalí talks about, he gives his own very particular interpretation to Millet's work, and he sees it as being enigmatic and sort of troubling and having all these, he's a surrealist, so he sees kind of unconscious thoughts as being, referenced in Millet's painting. So I think it's all of that. And you'll see in the exhibition, we have a group of paintings by by Dalí, which give frankly, a very weird, sort of bizarre psychosexual reading of. I'm not going to go into. Yeah, it's so weird, but it's fascinating, and it's, the paintings are beautifully painted. Everyone should go and see them because they're just so beautifully painted. But they have all these dense kind of layers. Anybody who knows about Dalí and what a kind of, in many ways, a strange artist he is, will kind of tap into that. But yeah, I think I would say to anybody, sort of dig into that a little bit. It's fascinating, really is.
We're talking to Simon Kelly. He's the curator of modern and contemporary art at the St. Louis Art Museum, as well as the co-curator of Millet and Modern Art from Van Gogh to Dalí. Simon, I heard a story that Dalí had a theory about the Angelus, that he was sort of seeing a conspiracy there. What was he up to with that?
I don't think it's so much just a conspiracy, but he did think that it was a burial scene. So
they weren't praying; they were mourning.
They're mourning, yeah. So he thought they were actually mourning the death of their son, and he asked the Louvre to do an X-ray of the painting. And when the Louvre did that, they found a sort of rectangular shape underneath the basket of potatoes at the bottom. I think that my personal opinion is that was probably just underdrawing for the basket, but for Dalí, that became the coffin, the coffin of the young son. And from there, that becomes a springboard for a number of the paintings, including those that we have in the exhibition.
Interesting. So if people want the macabre side of this, there's a theory that would support that, even if you don't buy that theory.
I don't buy it, but it doesn't really matter if I buy it. Because Dalí bought it, and he has his own fascinating theory, which is, as I say. I don't think we have the time to go into it now, to be honest with you, but it's fascinating and certainly worth exploring.
So I find myself wondering, this guy was such a big deal. And as you say, these record-setting prices, it's not that he wasn't appreciated commercially. Why do we see, say, Monet gets the postcard treatment today and Millet seems largely unknown?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not as if he's completely. I think he's less well known in America. I think in Europe and Japan, Japanese love Millet, so he is well known in certain parts of the world. I think part of it is, an artist like Monet, he did. One of the things that a lot of the artists try to do in the show is modernize Millet, and the way they often do that is with brighter color. Van Gogh is doing the same. So I think that might be part of it, that the color of Monet or a Van Gogh is Millet's color is beautiful, but it's often a little bit more subdued.
We like those vivid colors today.
So you like the vivid, right. So the colors of the haystack of Monet that we have in the show almost kind of glows, or the Sower by Van Gogh. So I think, Millet's works are maybe a bit more subtle and understated. They are very beautiful. We've talked about the Van Gogh Starry Night. Actually, the Millet Starry Night, which is hanging next to it, is a really beautiful painting too.
Does it hold up to the Van Gogh?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just different. It's different, but it's very kind of mystical and enigmatic, and they're actually a fascinating comparison.
So knowing what you know about Millet's life, how do you think he would feel about the fact that some of his contemporaries or people influenced by him have risen so much higher in the consciousness of the public?
I think, I don't know really, that's a good question. I think he was quite a private person. The most important thing for him was a kind of focus on his work. If he was happy with what he was doing, I think he would have been content. So I don't think he'd necessarily been, felt particularly jealous or anything like that. I think he'll probably be glad that his work has become the sort of catalyst for all these later paintings and drawings and pastels. So I think he'd be happy about that.
So this show, for anybody who wants to get up to speed on this guy or just see some great paintings, it's a tremendous opportunity. I'm wondering, what was the impetus for doing this here and doing it now?
I think it was. The sort of idea of the show is to argue for a different narrative, or a new narrative for the history of modern art, and think about the sort of standard narrative is often with Manet. So to think about a different originating artist, Millet, it goes back to actually 2010. When I was first starting to think about this. And then, we at the museum, we started to talk to the Van Gogh Museum because Van Gogh loved Millet. They became a sort of natural partner. And then it just developed from there. I traveled around the world with my co-curator Maite van Dijk from the Van Gogh Museum. We went to Japan, went all around Europe, all around America, just seeing these works and sort of building the thesis for the show. So I think that's it really. So hopefully it will get people to think about what modern art really means and think about Millet's important position within that tradition.
And now that you've built this show, is this something that other museums will end up picking up?
I think it's the show, in part because the loans are so so kind of unique and often, a work like the Starry Night was not in the Amsterdam venue of this exhibition at the Van Gogh Museum. It's only in St. Louis. So we do have some great, I've worked on a number of shows since I've been at the museum, and I think this one has the most exciting range of loans in it. But because they are so exciting, they often...
It makes it harder.
They're only lent to one venue. So like, as I say, Starry Night or the Angelus, or Starry Night is just coming to us. So I think, that's part of why we haven't traveled it beyond St. Louis. So this is, it was in Amsterdam. So this, if you want to see it, you have to see it here.
Come see it here. Yeah. Well, Simon Kelly, curator of modern and contemporary art at the St. Louis Art Museum, thank you for joining us today.
Great, Sarah. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And here to sing us out is James Birtles with Don McLean's Vincent. Birtles is a local teacher, and you may have heard him sing the national anthem at St. Louis Blues games.
Shadows on the hills, and sketch the trees and the daffodils, and catch the breeze.
And tomorrow on St. Louis on the Air, I'm taking a day off the air, but host Emily Woodbury will talk to a judge about the city's warrant amnesty program. We'll learn about new historic sites being added to the roster in Illinois, and we'll meet a bull rider coming to town to unleash the beast at the Enterprise Center. Podcast episodes of St. Louis on the Air are available wherever you get your podcasts. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU. Thank you for listening. I'm Sarah Fenske.
Perhaps they'll listen now.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.